My name is Rafaela, and for a long time, I lived inside a fog. I couldn't think. I didn't know what was real. And the scariest thing of all was that I thought it was my fault. At first, he called me light. He said that I lit everything up, that my laughter was the best part of his days. He listened to me carefully, praised me to everyone, made me feel special. But little by little, without me noticing, that light he said he loved became a nuisance. He began to erase me, slowly, without shouting, without scandal, only with loose words, with crooked looks, with that silence that hurts more than any discussion. It was like living in a room with the lights flickering. At one time he was sweet, affectionate, attentive. The next day, distant, dry, confused. And every time I asked him what was going on, he would say, "You're imagining things." Or worse, "You see a problem in everything, Rafaela." And I started to believe that. I began to doubt my perception. He said one thing one day and denied it the next. If I pointed out the contradiction, he turned the tables. "You got it wrong. You distort everything. You're paranoid." And there, in that subtle game, my mind began to unravel. I no longer knew what to believe. I felt stupid, forgotten, disconnected from me. She started the right sentence and ended insecurely. He always had a more intelligent, more logical, more mature answer. I saw myself getting smaller and smaller around him, and he made a point of reinforcing this. "You're too emotional. You need to stop fantasizing. It has to be more rational." And I tried. I tried so hard, but it was impossible to be rational in an environment where reality was manipulated all the time. There was a day when I prepared a special dinner. He came home from work, looked at the table set, and said indifferently, "I thought we had agreed to eat out." I was paralyzed. Because no, we hadn't agreed on that. But he spoke with such certainty, with such contempt, that I doubted my memory. I was silent. I apologized. I picked up the plates. I threw it all away. It was always like this. He changed history. Then he said that I was forgotten, that everything he did was always misinterpreted, and I started to lose myself. I started walking around with a notebook in my bag to write down what he said, because I wanted proof. I wanted to be able to show that I wasn't crazy, but even with the notes, I still felt crazy. It was like living in fog, a constant confusion, as if my mind was clouded, as if my identity was slipping through my hands. And him, always serene, always calm, always saying that I needed help. And I began to believe that maybe it was true, that maybe I had some disorder, that maybe I was unstable, insecure, weak. But what I didn't know yet is that I was being emotionally abused. And that the biggest sign of this, it is precisely when you stop trusting yourself. When you start to doubt your own memory, your intuition, what you have seen and heard clearly, it's because someone has already messed with your mind too deeply. And he did it masterfully. The narcissist never had to raise his voice. He used his calm tone as a knife. Every time I tried to argue, he would listen to me with that serene face, and then turn everything against me. He said I was being passive-aggressive, that my tone was full of demands, that I used words as a weapon. And then I kept quiet, because for him, I was never right. If I spoke, it was dramatic. If I kept silent, I was cold. If I cried, I was unstable. If I smiled, I was disingenuous. And that's how he turned me into a walking field of doubt. I no longer knew if what I felt was legitimate, or if it was more of an exaggeration of my head. I remember one time we went to lunch with friends. In the car, on the way, he made a subtle comment to me. "Maybe you'd better let me talk more today. Sometimes you get too excited." That crossed me. It wasn't the tone. That was the message behind caution. During lunch, I kept quiet, smile but without saying much. And yet, when we got home, he blurted out, "You were blacked out. Everyone noticed. Why do you do this kind of thing to embarrass me?" I was in shock. That took me apart. He said that I was exaggerated when I showed emotion, and that it was uninteresting when I tried to be neutral. Nothing was ever enough, or it was too much. And in this constant attempt to get it right, I was unraveling. I began to distrust people. From me, everything. I started to have anxiety attacks. My hands were shaking out of nowhere. I forgot simple words. He froze in the middle of sentences. I felt confused all the time, and he watched everything with the greatest calm in the world. He even said, You need to take care of your mental health. I'm here to help you, but you need to collaborate. As if he wasn't the cause, as if my confusion had come from the wind. And then, for the first time, I realized he made me sick, with little lies, with narrative changes, with emotional manipulation disguised as rationality. It was like living trapped inside a maze, where the exit changed places every time I got close. That's it. This is not love. This is abuse. Silent, subtle, but absolutely destructive. I wasn't going crazy. I was living in the middle of the fog created by him. And the worst of the fog, it's that it convinces you to stay, because you don't see what's going on until you're completely lost. I started working in survival mode. I woke up every day trying to guess his mood. There were days when he was sweet, helpful, complimented me for minimal things. Today you are so centered, Rafaela. That's how it's good to live with. And I smiled, with that relief that only those who live with a narcissist know, the relief of being right. But the next day, I just had to ask him where he had been, and that was it. Tension was setting in. You need to trust more, he said. That's why I don't open up to you. You always distrust everything. And I thought, maybe I'm really screwing up. Maybe I need to control myself. And so, little by little, I kept silent. I didn't want to bother. I didn't want to be the problem. He no longer wanted to provoke the heavy atmosphere of the house. But the heavy weather, it never ceased to exist. It just changed color. Sometimes it was cold. Sometimes it was dense. But it was always loaded. And I felt it in my body. My skin was always crawling. My back, tense. My stomach, closed. It was as if my whole body was screaming for help while my mind tried to understand what was wrong. There was a night when I was in the shower, and I started to feel dizzy. I sat on the floor, with the hot water falling, and for the first time I thought, I don't know who I am anymore. That phrase echoed in my head for days, because she was real. I no longer knew what I liked, what I believed, what was right or wrong. I lived for a balance that never arrived. I tried to adjust my every behavior so as not to trigger another conflict disguised as a mature conversation. But it wasn't maturity. It was manipulation with a face of lucidity. He told me that everything was for our good, that our fights happened because I still had unresolved emotional baggage, that if I were lighter, he would be too, and I carried that guilt like a cross, as if my pain were a moral failure, as if he were a victim of my emotional instability. That's it, broke me, because it wasn't just confusion, it was a total loss of identity. I came to exist as an extension of it, as someone who lives for the maintenance of the ideal relationship. But that relationship never existed. What existed was a stage, with an excellent actor, and a woman losing her own voice while applauding the chaos thinking it was love. Until, one day, I couldn't pretend anymore. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stopped. Pray to answer. I stopped justifying. I stopped questioning myself. Because there, in the middle of the fog, for the first time, I saw the exit light. And when you see that light, it is not grandiose nor clear. She's small, shy, but it's real, and it's enough for you to take the first step out. The day I decided to leave, there wasn't a big fight. There was no outburst, no door slamming. I just woke up different. I looked at him sleeping next to me and thought, this man will never love me the way I deserve to be loved. It was like a silent electrical discharge, a sudden awareness that is pierced through all the layers of the fog. I woke up, put on a simple outfit, and went to the kitchen. I made coffee just for me. I sat in silence, and for the first time, felt his absence as a relief, not guilt. At that moment, I knew. I've been. I began to plan my exit with the little clarity I had left. I spoke to a distant cousin. I looked for a therapist. I reviewed accounts on my behalf. I started to keep money hidden. It was like putting together an escape plan from psychological captivity, and that was exactly it. He noticed my change. Of course he did. The narcissist always notices. But he didn't ask. He tested it. He started to be more affectionate for a few days. He started saying that he wanted to travel with me. He even bought flowers on a random day. You walk strangely, but I know it's just a phase. Let's get out of this together, as always. But it was not a phase. It was the end. I no longer reacted as before. I no longer blamed myself for feeling suffocated. I no longer apologized for protecting myself. And every time he tried to manipulate me with another one of these rehearsed phrases, it was as if a veil lifted inside me. He's playing. Again. The fog began to lift. My memory reorganized. My thoughts stopped fighting with each other. I began to trust, little by little, my memories, in my emotions, in my voice. And then, one morning, he went to work, and I left our life. I closed the door without looking back. Not out of pride, but because looking back would have been betraying me once again. I took little. A suitcase, my cell phone, and my courage. But I left behind much more. Fear, blame, shame, and the feeling that maybe I was crazy. Because now I knew. I've never been crazy. I was manipulated. That's it. Changes everything. It changes everything. Because when you understand that the confusion did not come from within but was implanted, you stop blaming yourself, and it begins to heal. In the following days, the pain came with force. Not that pain of longing, but that of reconstruction, that of looking in the mirror and realizing that you don't know who you are anymore, who spent so much time trying to be what the other accepted, that he forgot the sound of his own inner voice. But now, the silence was different. It was not punishment. It was space. Space to think, to breathe, to feel without fear of being corrected. I started writing. Loose words. Fragments. Phrases like, "You're not wrong. You've been manipulated. You're still alive." I reviewed old photos, and it hurt, because there was the real Rafaela, the one who really smiled, the one who spoke with a twinkle in her eyes, the one who dreamed without asking permission. And this Rafaela had been buried by a love that only existed when I kept silent. But I survived, even confused, even broken, even in the dark. I dragged myself out, and now the light was mine. He tried to send short messages, disguised as worry. "I just want to know if you're okay. We had so many beautiful things. I'm suffering too." But I didn't answer, because the narcissist doesn't want to know how you're doing. They want to know if they still have access. And I learned in pain that access is closed, that love is not repeated, and that apologies without conscience are just the beginning of a new cycle of destruction. Today, I still have foggy days, days when I doubt myself, days when I feel the fatigue of reconstruction. But now, I know the way back. Because it doesn't start with "he's changed." It begins with, I listen to myself. And if you're now in that gray place, where nothing seems clear, where you wonder if you're exaggerating, if you're weak, if you're really getting too confused, listen to this. You are not alone. You're not wrong. You are surviving a type of abuse that leaves no visible marks, but shatters inside. And just being here, reading this, feeling it, you've already started hanging out. And start going out. It is the beginning of your healing, because no one comes out of a fog running. We stumble, stop, fall, but every step is a victory. Today, I live a silent reconstruction. I've learned to like quiet mornings, the smell of coffee made just for me, the sound of my own thoughts when they're not being questioned by anyone. I learned that peace does not scream, and that true love begins when we stop accepting crumbs made up of care. I reconnected with people he pushed away from me. I cried hugging friends who said, "We always waited for you to come back." And I came back, not the same, but more whole than I ever was. The woman who got out of that relationship is another, more attentive, firmer, more connected with herself. And even though I carry marks, I carry them like war scars, because I was a warrior, even when I doubted everything. I was strong, even when I felt broken inside. I was true to myself, even when I was led to believe that I was the problem. And the narcissist? He followed. He continued looking for someone who still doesn't know the game, someone who has a clean heart and an open mind, as I had. But now he no longer reaches me, because where I am, he doesn't enter. Here, there is light, there is truth, there is self-love, and above all, there is a woman who will never erase herself to fit into someone. Because today I know, the confusion was not mine, the weight was not mine, and the love I was looking for has always been here, in me. And this is where my story begins again. Not as a victim, but as a survivor of the most dangerous fog there is, the one created by those who say they love you, just to destroy you in silence. And to survive this fog, it is to be reborn with scars that glow in the dark, because they were the ones who guided me out of what seemed like love, but was camouflaged control. I don't romanticize pain. I don't think it's beautiful to have gone through that. I don't see the strength in having endured more than I should have. But today, I see courage. Courage to have listened to me when no one else listened to me. Courage to have believed in that small, muffled voice that said, "This is not normal." Courage to have left even without proof, even without certainties, only with intuition, and a pain impossible to ignore. And that's why I speak today. I tell other women to recognize themselves. I tell you that no one thinks she's crazy just because she's confused. I tell you that no one needs to hit rock bottom to allow themselves to leave, because the narcissist is not going to change. He will improve himself. It will become more convincing, calmer, more rational, but maduro. But the manipulation remains the same. He only changes his clothes. The only thing that changes is the tone. And you don't have to wait any longer. If you feel like you're losing yourself, that's enough. If you feel like you need to explain yourself all the time, you're past the limit. If you live tired, exhausted, confused, this is not love. It's emotional erasure. Today, the Rafaela who writes this here is another. She cries sometimes, but she is not ashamed. She is afraid, but she is not silent. She carries wounds, but she doesn't hide it. She learned that peace is worth more than any relationship that needs to be tried every day. And if there's something I can leave for those who lived, or still live, inside the fog, it's this: you're not broke. You were broken by someone who knew exactly where to hit, and yet, you are still here. You don't have to have all the answers. You just need to have the courage to take the first step, because the rest comes with time. And with love, you will finally learn to give yourself. On this side of the fog, it has life. There is light. There's you, whole, real, and for the first time, free. Free. That word that seemed so far away now lives in me. Not as a promise, but as a real state, as a daily choice. To be free, after living under the psychological domination of a narcissist, is not to dance in the rain or to smile every day. To be free is to be able to breathe without fear of being wrong. It is to have a coffee without wondering if the silence of the other is punishment. It's wearing an outfit without hearing that voice in your head saying, "This doesn't suit you." It is walking around the house without feeling that you are stepping on invisible shards. It's simple. It's every day. But it's gigantic. I still find myself reliving scenes. Those discussions where I was defeated even when I was right still come to mind. But now, I hug myself. I close my eyes and say to myself, "You did what you could with what you knew, and that's enough." I don't look for more explanations. I no longer try to understand why he did what he did, because understanding the narcissist is a trap. It is made of masks, and each one of them serves to keep you inside. Today, I only understand myself. I understand why it took me so long. I understand why I went back so many times. I understand why I believed it. And more than anything, I forgive myself. This story I told is not just mine. It is of thousands of women who live trapped inside relationships where violence does not scream. She whispers. It confuses. It wears out. It empties. And I want every woman who hears this to know, you don't have to wait for the pain to become unbearable. You don't need proof. You don't need a giant reason to leave. Your tiredness is reason enough. Because love, it was never meant to hurt like this. And when you finally get through the fog, even dragging, even crying, even shaking, on the other side, you'll find yourself. And go figure, as I did. What you felt was real. What he did was abuse. And what did you do? Was to survive. Now the time has come to live. For you. With you. For you. And that never again. No one confuses you about who you are. And if they ever try, you will know how to recognize it. Because now your mind is no longer invasion territory. It's sacred space. Today, everything I experienced with the narcissist has become a scar. And the scar does not disappear. But it doesn't hurt like it used to either. It reminds me of what I overcame. It reminds me of who I was when I didn't yet know what emotional manipulation was. Of how a woman can be pushed to the limit without being slapped a single time. And how it is possible to be reborn even after being deconstructed from the inside. There are days when I wake up and feel that twinge of insecurity. But now I recognize, this is not mine. This was taught. This was implemented. And so, patiently, I deactivate each trigger. I resumed my life little by little. I went back to doing things that he said were a waste of time. I painted his nails red, as he hated. I put on some loud music and danced alone in the room, without fear of judgment. I went to meet friends that he pushed away with subtle comments. I started writing, to remind myself of everything I am, and that he tried to erase. Today, I love who I'm becoming. A woman who is not afraid to speak out, that he does not apologize for feeling. That doesn't go to war to prove that it's right, because to be at peace became more important than being with someone. And if I could leave one last word for you who have heard me so far, would be this: it's not too late. It is not an exaggeration. It's not in your head. You're seeing what he wants to hide, and you have the right to get out of the fog, to take a deep breath, to get back on his feet, even though he was trembling, to rebuild everything he tried to destroy, because no one has the right to confuse you to the point that you forget about yourself. And if he did that, so you don't need any more proof. You need a step, then another, and then another, until I look back and say, as I say now, Rafaela who entered that relationship did not know what emotional abuse was, but Rafaela who left, she will never be deceived again. Never again. Because now, my lucidity is the armor that he will never be able to get through. Today I know that the biggest theft a narcissist commits is not that of his time, nor of his emotions. It is the theft of his clarity. He makes you disbelieve what you feel, what you think, what you see. And when you lose that, it loses everything. But I recovered, gradually, with fear, with relapses, with doubts. But I recovered. And that's why this story needs to be told. Not to expose him, but to free other women who still think they are exaggerating, who still think that if they loved a little more, he would change, who still believe that the problem is in them. It is not. The problem is this subtle, cruel, silent cycle that undermines you until you forget even what it was like to breathe peacefully. Today, I breathe, and with each conscious breath, I leave behind another remnant of that fog, another distorted memory, another well-told lie, another fault that was not mine. I don't need to prove anything anymore, not even for him, not pro mundo, not even for me, because I already know. I know I was manipulated. I know I was conditioned. I know that I was taken to a point where doubt became routine. And yet, I came back. I heard myself again, trusting me to remember who I am. And perhaps this is what scares a narcissist the most. A woman who survived the confusion and now sees clearly what she once called love. If you are there, listening to this with a tight chest, with tears in your eyes, afraid to admit that you live exactly what I lived, I just want to tell you one thing. You can also leave. You can also come back to yourself. Go back to what you were before him, to feel proud of existing without hiding. And when you leave, you will see the world with different eyes. But most importantly, you'll see each other again. And this reunion, it is the most beautiful part of liberation. Because finding yourself again, after being torn apart in silence, is an act of love that no narcissist can ever understand. They don't know what it is to truly love. They know how to imitate. They know how to manipulate. They know how to study their needs and mold themselves as a temporary solution. But to love, really love, no. Because those who love do not erase. Whoever loves does not drive the other crazy to have control. And now I understand why he was so afraid of my clarity. Because a woman who begins to see, it's a woman who starts to go out. And he knew, felt. He tried to stop with romantic gestures, with rehearsed speeches, with false vulnerabilities, but it didn't stick anymore. Because once you see it, you can't unsee it anymore. And it was at that moment that I knew I wasn't weak. I was too strong to continue living under control, too strong to accept a love that came with emotional interest, too strong to continue doubting my own lucidity. So, I went. And every day I keep going, relearning how to live, to trust, smiling without fear of punishment, speaking without fear of being labeled, to exist without shrinking. And every woman who leaves a relationship with a narcissist is living proof that it is possible to come back. You can be reborn. You can start over, even with the pieces patched up, even with the voice still shaking. Because in the end, the confusion they create, raisin, but the truth that we find again, that remains. And it is what guides me now. I don't need any more answers from him. I no longer need him to admit, for him to see, for him to change, because what I really needed It was to see myself again, and that now I will never miss again. And if one day I forget, if one day nostalgia deceives me, if fear tries to pull me back into that fog, I will remember what it took to find myself again. I'll remember the nights I cried in the bathroom, with the towel in my mouth so as not to make noise. I will remember the times I smiled in photos that today I can no longer look at, of the sweet words followed by silences that froze me, from the arguments that ended with me apologizing for pain that I hadn't even caused. I will remember Rafaela, who ceased to exist for months, years, just to fit what he needed. And remembering this, I will reaffirm my choice. Never again. I will never shut up to maintain a relationship. I will never again accept being called unstable just because I feel too much. I will never doubt my intuition again. I will never again allow myself to be broken in the name of a love that only works when I annul myself. Today, I no longer look for someone who promises me the world. I seek peace. Someone who walks by my side without trying to lead me. That you listen to what I say without reversing my speech. That I admire my intensity instead of suffocating myself by it. But above all, today I know that I don't need anyone else to validate me, because I am enough. It took him a while to understand that. It took a long time to get here, but I arrived. And now that I have myself back, no one loses me again. That was Rafaela's story. A woman who entered into a relationship in an entire way, was torn apart in silence. And even so, he found the strength to get out of the fog. And now, he lives outside of it, breathing fundo, stepping firmly, and leaving it behind. Everything that tried to make her forget who she always was. A whole woman, even after being broken. And whole, not because I lacked nothing, but because I gathered, little by little, every piece of me that he tried to erase. Today, when I look back, I no longer feel ashamed. For a long time, I was ashamed of having stayed, of having believed in the promises, to have returned after so many red flags, of having let my light be dimmed by someone who claimed to love me. But now I see, it was not weakness. It was love, misdirected love, but still, love. And that doesn't make me naive. It makes me human, because the mistake was never to love. The mistake was that she continued to love alone. He never accompanied me in this delivery. He just took advantage of it. He fed on my kindness, of my forgiveness, from my constant attempt to save a relationship he never intended to heal. And if you're listening to this right now, with a heavy heart, wondering if there's still time for you, it's terrible to live in manipulation, and it's like you're in a hurry not knowing what to do and what attitude to take. And this is difficult, especially when you have a child. Yes, there is time. While you breathe, there is time. There's time to step away, to ask for help, to start slowly, not knowing exactly how, but knowing that you need to. Because every woman who leaves a relationship with a narcissist carries two certainties. The first, she was never crazy. The second, she has always been strong, even when he doubted it, even when it got lost, even when he kept quiet so as not to lose the other. And now I can proudly say, Rafaela is back, more aware, but more whole than she ever imagined she would be. And if there's something the narcissist will never understand, is that the woman who survives this type of abuse does not go back to who she was. She comes back much bigger, much clearer, and above all, impossible to confuse again. Impossible to confuse, because now, my lucidity is my protection. My body responds. My soul alerts. My voice, once stifled, is now a shield. I don't need external evidence anymore to believe what I feel. Today, I believe in myself, in my intuition, in my discomfort, in that feeling that I used to ignore, and that today guides me. And you know what's more beautiful? It's just that I'm no longer afraid of being alone. The fear went away along with the need to be accepted at any cost. Today, my company is enough, because now, I'm my ally, not my enemy. When I think about the past, I don't see myself as a fragile victim. I see a strong woman who fought against something that few understand, because emotional abuse is invisible. It's sophisticated. It is denied. It is confused with love. But I lived. I felt it in my skin. I bled inside while smiling on the outside. And now I speak. I speak because my story may be the exact translation of what someone is experiencing at this moment, and still does not have the courage to name. I tell you so that no one doubts your own pain anymore. I tell every woman to know, Constant confusion is not love. Walking on eggshells is not normal. Losing yourself in the name of a relationship. It is not romantic. It's destructive. And finally, I leave this here. If today you are living in the middle of the fog, breathe, feel, listen to what your body is saying, and know you can leave. You're going to leave. And on the other side, he will meet again the woman who was once forgotten within a false love. It is still there. She is waiting. And when you find her again, you will know exactly what I mean when I say, with all the letters, I wasn't crazy. I was manipulated. But today, I am free. I'm mine. I am light again. And I'm never going to let anyone erase it again. Because now, who controls my light? It's me. There came a time when I realized that my story needed to stop being a secret, that the silence he used against me, I would turn it into a voice, that everything he tried to destroy, my strength, my identity, my faith in myself, would become exactly what would get me back on my feet. Today, every time I share this experience, I see in the eyes of other women that same faded sparkle that I once carried, but I also see hope. Because when we hear someone telling what we live in silence, something changes inside. You understand that you are not crazy. You understand that you are not alone. And you understand, finally, that there is still time. If you're in that relationship where everything seems blurry, where you don't know who you are anymore, where you don't recognize yourself, that's the sign. You don't have to wait for it to fall any further. You don't have to wait for it to get worse, nor to cling to the next promise of change. You just need to do for yourself what he will never do, to see you. And when you do that, when you see yourself clearly, it will hurt, yes, but it will also heal. The Rafaela who came out of this story is not perfect. She still carries traumas. She still has cloudy days. But now, she knows how to come back. You know who it is. And he knows that he will never again. He will give it up for no one. So, if you're still there, stuck in the cycle, hearing promises, feeling like you're the one who's getting lost, I leave you with this last truth, which saved me. Constant confusion is not love. And when someone really loves you, you don't feel sick. You deserve more. You deserve you. And when that happens, no one else will be able to confuse you. Never again. Never again. Because now I know. True love begins when we come back to ourselves. It doesn't matter how long you stayed. How many times did he come back? How many excuses he heard? How many versions of the same pain have you tried to believe would be different? What matters is the now. That moment. That moment when you take a deep breath, and even with a heavy heart, you begin to understand, I deserve more. The narcissist tried to erase my essence, but failed, because I left, and I took with me everything he will ever have: conscience, sensitivity, ability to truly love. Today, my story is not about him. It's about me, on the way back, about the woman who, even in pieces, chose to rebuild herself, afraid, with doubt, with courage. And now when someone asks me who I am, I don't hesitate. I answer firmly, I'm Rafaela, the woman he tried to confuse, and that today is pure clarity. And this version of me no one erases, nobody manipulates, nobody controls it, because she is mine, at last, whole, free, and back.